Welcome in the sixth episode. In today's episode, we will implement the logic to handle the front material of the puzzle. So currently our puzzles does not have any material. So we have to add some pictures to be displayed on the top of the puzzles. Okay, so let's get started. So let's open our project. And before we move to implement anything, we need to actually do one modification in our project. If you click on the asset folder, as you see, we have our graphics directly in the asset folder. We will have to place the whole graphic into the resources folder. So right click, create folder, and name it resources. Okay, you make sure you name this folder resources, because otherwise you won't be able to load the graphics from within the script. And now I will just grab this graphic folder and move it to the resources. Okay, so everything should be just fine. Let's just double check if our game is still playable. And as you see, there is no graphics missing. Everything is as it was. But we need to do this modification in order to load our graphic from within the script. So make sure you do that, otherwise you won't be able to progress with this tutorial. Okay, so now let's go to our scripts. And first thing, let's open our picture script. And then inside the picture script, we need to add two variables. So that's going to be the private material. And I will just going to call it first material. And then let's just duplicate it. That's going to be, and we need to have a second material as well. Okay, so we're just going to handle two materials from within the picture for every single picture. Let's just delete these comments. And then below the update function, I will create a public void set first material. Okay, and then we want to pass the material. And then we want to pass the string texture path. Okay, and then inside this function, we're just gonna get the first material and assign our new material to it. And then we wanna take this first material dot main texture will be equal to resources dot load. And then we wanna take the texture path and then type of texture 2D, and then as a texture 2D. Okay, so that's the reason why we had to place everything in the resource folder, because we were using the resources load, which is searching for the resource folder in our project. Okay, and then we're gonna pass the path to our texture, and we're gonna take the texture and assign it to our first material. Let's do similar thing for the second material. So we're just gonna copy this function, and I'm just gonna paste it below. And then I will name it set second material. Okay, and then instead of the first material, we need to just replace the first material with the second material. Okay, and then we need two more functions. So below that, I will just call another public void apply first material. And then inside this function, I will just call the game object dot get component renderer dot material will be equal to first material. And then we want to do the same for the second material. So I will just copy this function, paste it below, and then I will name it apply second material. And then we need to just replace this first material with the second material. Okay, so these are the functions which we will need from this class for now, and that's it for this class. Let's move on to our picture manager class. So in our picture manager, first of all, we need to add a few variables. So let's just add private list. And that's going to be the list of the material. material list will be equal to new list of the material. Okay. So this is going to be the list which holding all of the materials. That's going to be the second materials. Then we need another private list of strings. And this is going to be the texture path list will be equal to new list of strings. Okay, then another one will be private material, and this is going to be the first material, and then private string first texture path. Okay, so these are all variables which we will need. And then in our start function, before we spawning the picture mesh, let's implement the function load materials. Okay, we don't have this function yet, so we need to implement it. So below the start method, I will just put private void load materials. Okay, and inside this function, the first thing we will need to get the material directory name and the puzzle category directory name. So if you go to our Unity, you will see that we have the resource folder, and then inside the resource we have our puzzle categories, and then each category is separated in different folder, and each of them have a back texture. So our back texture will be our first material, and then the second material will be the picture of any of the fruit or vegetable. So inside the vegetable we have our back texture, and we have few different pictures. So once we implement it, you will be able to replace this back texture with whatever texture you have, you like, and then you'll be able to have different back image based on the category type. Okay, let's go back to our Visual Studio. Inside this function, first of all, we need to take the material file path. So I will just add this thing in our game settings. So let's go quickly to our game setting class, and then right below, right at the bottom, I will add the function public string get material directory name, and this is gonna be the return materials, and make sure you put this slash at the end. Okay, and then another thing we need is public string get puzzle category texture directory name. It's long name, but I think it's nicely describing what we want to do. So in this function we will return the puzzle category name, but before we do that, we need to actually store this somewhere. So right at the top of this function we will add the private read only, and this is going to be the dictionary, and the first one will be e puzzle categories, and then the second one will be string. Okay, and I will just call it puzzle cat directory will be equal to new, and then make sure you put this new constructor. Okay, so this dictionary will store our category name, and then the category, and then the folder name for the specific category. We'll just populate this function, this list with something. Below our start method, I will just create one more function. So private void set puzzle category directory. Okay, and then let's do this puzzle cat directory dot add And then first of all, we want to add the ePuzzle categories.fruits, and then the category name, the folder name. So the folder name for this one will be, let me quickly just go to our to our Unity. And as you see, for our fruits, the directory name will be fruits, and for our vegetables, the directory name will be vegetables. Okay, so if you have any different directory name here, make sure you put the right directory in the Visual Studio. So let's go back to Visual Studio now. Okay, and then so for the fruits, we want to put the name fruits. Make sure you put the right directory name, otherwise the game won't be able to locate the pictures. And then another one will be puzzle directory.add, and then ePuzzle categories.vegetables, and then we want to put the name vegetables. Okay, because that's the directory name. And then we want to call this function from our start method. Okay, so make sure this function is called from the start method. So we have our dictionary populated with the directory names. And now let's scroll down to our getPuzzle category texture directory name function. It's long name. So inside this function, we want to check if the puzzle category directory.contain key, and then we want to pass our game settings dot puzzle category. Okay, so if we want to check first of all if the category which we selected has a entry in our dictionary. If it is, then we want to return, and then we need to put the full path. So if I go back to Unity again, as you see, the full path to our directory will be, we're starting our root folder will be the resources, so we need to put the graphics puzzle category, and then of course the name of the folder. So we want to get the graphics, then puzzle category. Let me just double check. So graphics puzzle category, and then I want to put the plus. Okay, let me just resize it, and then we want to get the puzzle category, and then we want to put the square braces, and then we want to get this game settings dot puzzle category. Okay, hopefully this is not too complicated. So otherwise, we want to put the debug.log, okay, error maybe, error, cannot get the directory name. Okay, and then we want to return empty string. So now let's switch back to our picture manager, and in our picture manager, let's go back to our load materials function, which we just created. And then we want to put the var material file path will be equal to game settings dot instance dot get material directory name. Okay, another one will be var texture file path will be equal to game settings dot instance dot get puzzle category texture directory name, and then var par number will be equal to, and we want to cast int game settings dot instance dot get par number. Okay, so you want to just grab all of this data. So now we need to get the const string material base name. So the base name for our material will be, or we call it picked, but you can call it whatever you like. So I call it picked from picture, is a shortcut from picture. So I'm gonna name all of my materials. Will be the pick 1, pick 2, pick 3, and so on. Okay. And the next one will be var, the first material name, will be equal to bag. Okay, so that's gonna be our bag material name. So now let's loop through all of the pictures. So for var index will be equal to 1, and then index is less equal than the par number, index plus plus. Okay, so we want to loop through all of the pairs which we selected, and then we want to do the var current file path will be equal to material file path plus material base name plus index. Okay, so we're going to create the material for 20 pictures, and then each material will be called the picture, the pick 1. So we want to get the first material, so it's going to be the pick 1. So it's going to be the pick plus the index, which is starting from 1. So it's going to be 1. Okay, so it's just simple to grabbing the correct material. So it's very important you naming your pictures, your materials the same as we specify here, and then the bag material to be named like that. Okay, if you want to name it differently, you will have to update this name in this file. So the next thing we want to grab the material, and I'm going to call it mat, will be equal to resources dot load, and we want to pass the current path, file path, and then type of material, and we want to do this as material. Okay, and then we want to push this material to our material list dot add, and we want to add our mat. Okay, then below that we want to grab all of the texture names for our second material. So var current texture file path will be equal to texture file path plus mat base name plus index. Okay, so make sure you're just using the texture file path, not the material file path now, and then texture file path list dot add, and we want to add the current texture file path. Okay, so we're just going to store all of this file path for every single texture. And then below this for loop, we want to get the first texture path will be equal to texture file path plus first material name, which is going to be the bag, and then first material will be equal to resources dot load material file path plus first material name type of material as material. So we have our function to load all of the materials, and now we need to just apply these materials. So I will just go to our spawn picture mesh function, and below this function, right after the for loop, I will just call function apply textures. Apply textures, okay, and then we need to create this apply texture function. So right below, we want to call public void apply textures, and then in this function we want to actually randomize our second material. So we every time we start the game, the certain picture will be in different position. So first of all, let's store the var random material index will be equal to random dot run range, and we want to get the range from 0. As you see, this range is inclusive, so it's going to be the 0 can be selected, and then material list dot count, and then var applied times will be equal to new int, and that's going to be the array, and then material list dot count. Okay, so the reason why we need this apply times array is because every single picture we want to apply it twice, so we have the pair on the board. Otherwise, it's not going to be possible. So let's first of all loop through all of this apply times. So for int I equal to 0, I is less than the material list dot count I plus plus. I just want to call this apply times at I will be equal to 0. Okay, so just going to reset everything to 0, and then we want to call a function for each var object, which I'm going to call O in picture list. Okay, so we want to call all of the pictures which we spawn, and then first one we want to do the var random. So we want to store the previous index. It's going to equal to rand material index. Counter will be equal to 0. Okay, force material will be equal to false, and then we want to do the while loop. Applied times at random material index is more or equal to. So if we selected the same picture twice, more than 2 times, so obviously we shouldn't, because we want to have exactly 2 pictures on the board. Or let's open 2 braces, or our random previous picture will be equal to random material index, so our new material index, and we dot force the material. Okay, this will make sense in a minute when we finish this implementing, so just stick with me for now. And then random material index will be equal to new random number, so random dot range from 0 to material list dot count. Okay, so we want to select another material, random material, and then counter plus plus, and then if counter is more than 100, so if we already tried more than 100 times to apply to select the material, then we want to loop through the materials list. So for var j equal to 0, and then j is less than the material list dot count, and then j plus plus. So if we could not, if we already tried 100 times to select the specific material and is still not successful, we want to loop through all of the material list, and then apply the first available material which has not been applied yet. Okay, so this is what this function is doing. So if the applied times at j is less than 2, so if we found the material which has been applied less than 2 times, we want to do the random material index will be equal to j, and then force material will be equal to true, Okay, and then outside this for loop, we want to check if force material is equal to false. We want to just return. Okay, so if we could not find anything, we just want to return from this function. And then outside of this while loop, so make sure you are outside of the while loop, we want to grab our object, which is our O. So O dot set first material, so that's going to be our picture, set first material, and then we want to pass our first material, and then for the texture is going to be the first texture path. Then we want to call O dot apply first material, and then O dot set second material, and then we want to call this material list, and then random material index, and then texture path list at random material index. Okay, and then applied times at random material index plus equal 1. Okay, so we want to increase the applied times, and then force material will be equal to false. Okay, so make sure you put all of this implementation in, and then I think that's it from our code perspective. So let's save everything now, and let's switch back to our Unity. And then first thing, in our resource folder, we want to right click and create folder, and we want to call this folder materials. Need to be the same name as we specify in our game settings. So let's quickly double check this name. So in our game settings, we have our materials folder. Okay, make sure the name is the same. So asset, resources, materials. Okay, so in our materials folder, the first one we want to create, right click create, and then material, and I want to call this material back. So that's going to be the back material, and then from the list, from the shader, I want to select the sprites and then default. Okay, so that's going to be our back material, and then we want to create 20 materials for our picture. So I will just right click, create material. I will call this material pitch 1. Okay, so the reason I call it pitch, because as you remember in our script, in our picture manager, we have defined our base material name, the pitch. Okay, if you define any different name here, make sure you call that name. And then for the back material, I call it back. If you call it any different name, just make sure you have the right name here. So I just gonna do the picture 1, and make sure you just select the sprites and then default. And then we want to create the 20 pictures. So right click, create material, and this is going to be the pitch 2, and then the same sprites and then default, and we want to create the 20 picture like that. So I have my 20 materials created, so make sure you have the materials from picture 1 to picture 20, and all of them are sprite default. So the sprite and then default, you have to set the type for every single one, and you have the back material as well. So I think at this point we are ready to actually test our game if the correct sprite is applied to our pictures. So if you press play and then press play, select, let's say, 15 pairs. Okay, there is something wrong with our material, so there is no errors, but there is something wrong, like the texture could not be found, but the material is applied, because you see there is a black color on it, white color on it. Okay, let me just check what is happening. Okay, so I found the issue why the materials is not applied correctly. So if you go back to the scripts and then game settings. So in our game settings, in our long function get puzzle category texture directory name, make sure you go to that function. We have our path, we're returning our path, but we forgot to add another slash here. Okay, so the category, this is the name of the folder which holding all of the puzzle pictures. So we need to have a slash here, and we need to have a slash at the end. So plus and then slash. Okay, so make sure you put this path like that. Make sure you have these slashes, all of the slashes in, this slash and the last one. Let's save it. And then there is one more mistake which I made in the picture manager. So go to the picture manager and go to the load materials function. And inside our for loop, we have specified the current texture file path, but in the texture list, instead of adding this current texture file path, we're adding the current file path, which is not correct. Okay, so make sure you copy this one and paste it here. So this function should look like that. So save everything now, and then let's go back to Unity and let's try it out. So I'm just gonna press play. Then let's say 15. As you see, we have our material applied, the first one, but it's upside down. So we're gonna fix this one in a second. So for 20, we have 20 pictures and the material is applied. Okay, so let's quickly fix that rotation. We just go to the prefab folder and then picture prefab. Just make sure you double click it so you are in the prefab edit mode. And then in the position, in the rotation, I will set the Z rotation to be equal to 180. Okay, so make sure you have this rotation 180 on the Z axis, and then press the small arrow to save the changes, and then let's try again. So we're just going to rotate the picture. So this still does not work. So we need to, I think we're setting the rotation in our script as well when we're spawning the object. So let's go back to our scripts and then picture manager. Okay, so in our spawn picture mesh function, make sure we go to that function. When we're actually creating the instance of the prefab, we're just passing the picture prefab and then picture spawn position, but we're taking the rotation from the spawn point, not from the picture itself. So make sure you just get this picture prefab and you're just getting the rotation from the picture prefab, not from the picture spawn point. Okay, so let's save everything now. And let's go to the Unity. So let's try again. And as you see, everything is looking good. So let's try the different number of pairs. Let's say 20 and different category. So we have everything right. So our first texture is working fine. Let's quickly test our second texture. So in order to do that, I will go quickly just for the testing purposes to the picture manager. And then when we have our apply textures, I will just quickly, just for the testing, I will just add over here o.apply second texture, second material. Okay, this is just for test. Okay, let's save everything and let's try the game again. So as you see, we are applying the second texture. We have a pair of every picture displayed. Okay, so make sure you have 2 pictures for every different kind. So this is like for the vegetable. Let's try the fruits. Let's say 20. Okay, we have a fruits as well. Okay, so everything seems to be okay at this point. So now let's quickly go back to our picture manager class and make sure you just remove this apply second texture, second material which we just added. Okay, so make sure it's not there. So we want to start from the first material. Let's save the project, go back to Unity again, start it, press play. Okay, so everything seems to be working fine. So I think that's it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching and see you again in the next episode.
Yeah, yeah.